often we talk about risk of doing something, but I think there's actually a larger risk of not doing something. The risk of stasis is much greater because the world isn't slowing down. For many of our organisations, especially Te Putua Matua, the financial sector is changing faster and faster, and for us to be relevant, we have to change faster with it as well. And so I think that's part of the thing that's really exciting is we're at an inflection point where it's becoming clear to the entire bank that we need to be more adaptive, we need to be faster to change, and that technology is going to play a large part of that. And that if we do sit still, things are going to run away from us.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Troy Hammond and you're watching or listening to Table Talk. I just want to stop and say thank you so much to everyone that watched or listened to the first episode. We had such amazing feedback. We had so many people subscribe to us on YouTube, 1,300 people subscribed to us on YouTube within a day, and we had so many people follow us on Spotify. Not only that, we had amazing feedback. So many of you are really enjoying it. We had lots of questions. We had lots of influence in terms of, hey, can you find this out? It would be really good to understand this. And so thank you for helping contribute to the show. And I want to say, if you haven't subscribed, if you haven't followed, this is your chance right now. About half the people that watch tend to subscribe, and so we want to up that, because in order for us to produce great content, we need to get sponsors, and the way we get sponsors is by getting subscribers and followers, and you probably know the drill by now. So thank you so much, and if you haven't, this is your opportunity to jump in now before we kick into this episode. This episode is going to be fantastic. It's for senior leaders in government. We've got Chief Digital Officer, we've got Chief Technology Officer, we've got Chief Information Officer, and we've got Chief Information Security Officers. And so strap in, it's going to be a fantastic episode. We talk about some really interesting topics. The table really gets discussing some things that are pertinent to them and pertinent to you. And so strap in and enjoy. So kia ora everyone, welcome. This is fantastic. It's a real challenge, as you can imagine, to get people's diaries to align. I find that if I should do it a month out and then post everyone on social media saying, hey, guess who's going to come? They come, and I didn't do it with you all, and you still came, so thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Let's get around the table and just introduce ourselves. So we'll start to the left, Stuart.
Yeah, kia ora, I'm Stuart Wakefield. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Ministry of Education.
Welcome, Stuart. And Milica?
Hello, good morning. My name is Milica, and I'm a Chief Digital Officer at Public Service Commission, and I also play a role as a Chief Information Officer at Ministry for Women.
Excellent. And John?
Kia ora, I'm John. I'm the Acting Assistant Governor for Digital Solutions and Security at the Reserve Bank.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And Jenna?
Kia ora koutou. My name is Jenna. I am the Chief Information Security Officer at Callaghan Innovation.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming on. Thank you for sharing space. Really excited to shoot episode 2 here and to talk about some of these topics and things that people want to hear about. The feedback has been really fantastic so far on like the kimono being pulled a little bit in terms of information and sharing. And so that's something that we're really keen on doing here, is sending that information, elevate a field rich with information back down so that the next person can write it up a little bit more easier. And so to sort of frame that by asking a question around that, like if there's a lot of people who listen to this or watch this that are wanting to be C-level in the public sector or C-level period, I always say be careful what you wish for. What advice would you give them, Milica?
Advice in terms of how to get there?
Yeah, both.
Or what it's like?
Both. Well, I'll be greedy and ask for both.
Right. So I'm not sure if there is a set path how to get there. There is no building blocks. I always knew I was going to be in digital, and I really didn't know where I was going to land. I just knew I wanted to get the next best thing and the big project and the complex work. But there was no set path to get here. I think doing a good job, taking ownership and delivering well and thinking well about problems and navigating challenges that come your way is certainly a good thing to sort of puts you on the map. What's it like? It's awesome. It's hard. There's a lot to worry about. There's a lot to think about the satisfaction that you get about delivering and making a difference. And, I see digital as a enabler for an agency, for an organization to do good work, we get excited about digital because we love digital, but the real magic comes from actually enabling the real work to happen, for the value to come to people and communities in New Zealand. So you get to see that sort of play out quite nicely in these roles.
Excellent. Stuart, when I was chatting to Bill Moses about this, he was like, I'd be really interested to hear what Stuart's take is on, like, what's it been like being a CIO or a C-level in the public sector earlier and to what it is now? Like, has it changed? Has it evolved? What's his take on it?
Yeah, I think the role continues to evolve, and it's not unique to public sector in my view. The nature of how organisations are using technology continues to evolve more and more rapidly. I think there's, if I reflect back on what I was doing, 5 or 10 years ago, the nature of what we do today is fundamentally shifted in that time. Some of the risks that we deal with, but also some of the opportunities. So, that's echoing your earlier points. It's a fantastic role in the sense that you're right at the vanguard of change and opportunity, and that's a fantastic part of the role.
Interesting. So if we're talking about the transformation and the vanguard of change, like security, Jenna, is a really big one. Obviously, I'm looking at you on this question because you, I think, are the youngest across Australia and New Zealand to get into the CISO role. Is that correct?
Open to challenges, but so far I am youngest.
That's if we're taking the startup programs off the table, right? Like,
I would take the 19-year-old startup founders off the table. Just to save my own ego in this moment. But that's true.
At 27?
I was 28 when I got the role. I'm 30 now. And I tried to talk my way out of it. I think it's funny if you think about, going into the role, I actually tried to talk my own leader out of offering me that position. And I was like, nah, shouldn't be me. But Jen Sherrington, who's my leader, she's our kind of COO, wouldn't have a bar of it, which is really good. She was an absolute ally and mentor in that moment and was like, absolutely should be you. And it turns out it's awesome. It's amazing. It's really, really cool. And it's not actually fundamentally impossible to do. You know what I mean? I think it should be more accessible, because once you're in a kind of C-level role in an organization and you're able to actually influence and make change or make decisions, and if you have the aptitude to do that, you don't need your age or background to fit in. A lot of it is about kind of just aptitude to pick it up and go for your life, Yeah.
Interesting. I think, and that's great to see especially for the public sector for me, because there is a history of hiring a lot of older white dudes with grey hair,
What you're saying.
I'm here as well, I'm surprised I'm not a CEO. But no, I think it's great. Like, I think that change, that energy, and that in the public sector is great. That for me is fantastic.
Especially with security, I think, just because I didn't realize I didn't answer your question about security too, but you need a lot of energy, I think, for cyber. It almost kind of makes sense to see young people, because you can have cyber attacks and incidents at any hour of the time, especially in New Zealand. Like, it's going to happen offshore and impact us at an awkward time. So it actually helps to have youth and energy and enthusiasm to do it, So I think that's actually probably an advantage for the industry.
Yeah. John, so you're Chief Digital Officer at Reserve Bank, New Zealand. What do you think has helped you coming from the corporate sector, into your role? What do you think that's hindered you?
I think in many ways the roles are the same. We've got basically the same challenges. It's just where the money's coming from is slightly different. For me, I've had a lot of experience across individual corporates as well as a consultant, which gave me a fairly broad understanding about how both the private sector and the public sector work, which brings a useful view around how technology can actually impact an organisation and the purpose of the organisation. I think that there maybe was a time where you could take the computers out of things and the organisation would keep on working, but it's certainly not been for the last 20 years. And basically tech is the oxygen that keeps us alive now. So it is a really important role.
How's that role changed, Milica, for technology leaders now, considering, as John's saying, that tech is so crucial that everyone, every CEO, wants the latest and greatest, or wants their son or daughter's recommendation on what they should do going forward? How has that sort of changed in your role now that people are more comfortable with technology?
Oh, are we talking about AI? I mean, Honestly, AI has just bridged the gap between all scary digital, scary tech. I don't know, or something happens, it's a magic box that does things for me too. I can actually, it's so humanized now, and ChatGPT has done that. It's ChatGPT is what COVID was to virtual working, right? And it's just bridged that gap between digital and people who use it for their roles. And now everybody has ideas how they could use something like this and something like that, and why don't we jump onto this? And it's awesome. I love it. People who are there on the ground doing the work, and they can see how technology, different solution, different product can help them, is quite exciting. It's different when you are from digital, trying to think how you're going to enable an organization's outcomes and enable them to do work. And it's awesome when you sort of have that also coming through to you going, oh, do you think this would be great? And you go, actually, it could be good. It could work. So it's I suppose it's about exploring what are good solutions, what are good digital kind of footprint that you want to sort of embark on to continue the entire organization being able to continue to do its job and achieve its purpose while all of this new tech is coming at us. It's coming at us fast. New products, AI is just going to bring, technology has been changing really fast, and new products been coming on, and the speed of their change has just got a boost as well. So we just have to really keep on our toes, how we figure out the new tech, how we're bringing that to the table, how we're exploring it, and how we're adopting it.
Who's using LLMs as part of their business? Yeah.
Well, we have one. Callaghan Innovation has a large language model internally that is developed by a team of data scientists and distinguished scientists and PhDs specific to machine learning. It's named Hoiho.
It's named what, sorry?
Hoiho.
Hoiho.
Hoiho. It's like a penguin.
Yeah.
Fun fact for you guys is it consumes so much data and information that in wintertime it heats up our kitchen out in Lower Hutt because it just consumes so much power and energy that it literally heats things up quite a bit. We develop it ourselves. We should look to consume it ourselves internally, but a lot of it is ingested out for customer projects or kind of patent material. But even our CEO Stefan Korn has a PhD in AI. It's as an organization, very, very forward for that.
How do we govern AI, John? How do we allow it to move forward and take advancement without putting some sort of guardrails on it?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of a really interesting space because the technology is so new. We're not really sure about both where it's going to be useful. We've got some ideas, but also where it's going to be dangerous, or it doesn't really work for us. So I think for us, we look at AI as it's certainly something that we want to be playing with at the moment, because I'm not necessarily sure that we'll get the answers we want now, but what we will get is learning how to use AI and how to use the new technology. From a risk perspective, we think about it in the same way that we think about model risk for banks, and that with these large language models, often you're not really sure about where they're being trained from, and so therefore you're not sure what biases and so on are built into the language model. It is definitely something that we can see utility for across the bank, whether it's supporting our supervision teams or supporting our economic teams with commentary. There's a huge amount of opportunity for the technology. It's just about picking the key things which are going to be really useful for us.
Yeah, the right use case.
Yeah.
That for me has always been the biggest challenge in the public sector, is the ability to try, to fail. Yeah. If I'm honest, is to try something knowing that there's a high chance that you're going to fail. And so I've always been pushing, anytime I look at hiring managers or anytime I'm talking to someone, is to say, well, let's remove that narrative. Most things we've got to try, we've got to start, we've got to do something, right? But the pushback I get is immense. So if I'm looking at AI, or if I'm looking at all these other technologies, what is it the fear of failure that you think, if I'm talking to you, Stuart, what do you think it is that's stopping us from trying to adopt these things a little bit faster?
I'm not sure the fear of failure is necessarily universal. I think it will depend a lot on the particular use case or scenario that you're talking about. If I reflect on education, the uptake of LLMs in education is massive. Students are doing this all day, every day. It's a fantastic set of capabilities, but not without risks. So to govern that, I guess we're taking a softer approach at the moment, which essentially is a proceed with caution, being aware of the risks that John and others have talked about. I think the risk appetite will vary hugely depending on what you're doing. I mean, if you're building a regulatory or funding system, the risk appetites are very low. If you're thinking about new ways that students can use technology to learn or develop curriculum resources, I mean, we have 2,500 schools in the system that are experimenting and doing this all day, every day. It's fantastic, and looking at how that continues to evolve. One of the really innovative ways I saw LLMs being used in education is where a teacher or educator will actually answer the assignment themselves with an LLM and then give it to the students to critique where the machine has got it wrong. That's a fantastic way of flipping the model around. So.
Critical thinking, that's good.
And there's a big difference between public AI, ChatGPTs of the world, and enterprise AI solutions where you know what it's learned of, you know what information it has. Like you say, you build your own, you can trust that it has a ring fence around it, nothing's getting out, and you can use it. It has a huge potential, and it's something we absolutely need to figure out a way to keep exploring. Public AI, I don't know. I'd be
So
very,
you don't think
very.
we should put Elon's grok in the public sector and just...
I don't know, like ChatGPT. I don't know.
Something, a plug is Ben Reid, who's a futurist in New Zealand. He's based in Christchurch, a really cool guy. Has a matrix of biases and leanings of models. That's a really good reference point, and it kind of shows where they are on like socioeconomic spectrums or based off how they're trained. And so obviously some models that are trained off 4chan will be, have a biases, and whereas some that are fed and growing off of, Gen AI, Open ChatGPT, how do I do my homework, 1, 2, 3, that's going to be, a bit more on the social openness side of spectrum. It's very fascinating. And I actually think he's just put out a book.
Yeah.
So Ben Reid, check him out if you're very into AI content.
But +1 on that comment. I'm just halfway through the 600 page.
He's cool.
Some really interesting views in there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that this really shows us as well is that if you go back sort of 15 or 20 years, tech used to appear in corporate world first, and then several years later would trickle down into consumer world. And we've seen a complete inversion of that over the last sort of 15 or 20 years. Expectations about what tech should be able to do for us is coming from the consumers, and so our customers and our users are coming to us and saying, well, I can do this at home, why can't I do this in the office? And this is really a challenge for traditional corporate tech, and especially in the public sector, because we don't control the narrative about what technology is going to be used for and how it's going to be used any longer. And I think that the way to get ahead of that is to actually put yourself into the mindset of one of your staff. What would be useful for my staff? What would they be asking for, and how can I respond for that?
So everyone's getting iPhone 11s now?
Maybe not.
I think just picking up on John's point, I mean, there's two trends here. I guess the consumerization of tech, the move of a lot of that into cloud-based environments. That's both a risk and an opportunity. I mean, the model of scarcity and constraint and a specialist team in a technology department, you're no longer constrained by that. You can, and there are a whole lot of capabilities out of most businesses that can now pick up these tools and develop new capability. It's how do you enable that safely versus perhaps the more traditional model of how do you shut all that stuff down and constrain it.
And I think that, if you go back sort of 10 years or so, there was a real fear around shadow tech.
Yes.
And I think shadow tech is the tech now.
Yeah, exactly.
The idea that there is a tech department that does everything is just so antiquated.
Yeah.
And what that means is that it's not just the tech department that needs to be thinking about tech skills. It's everyone in the bank.
Yeah.
So if I think about development skills, our economics team runs machine learning models for economic forecasting. So they need to have the same development skills, the same security skills, the same code practices and repositories and all of those sorts of things that one of our developers have.
I think a lot of companies for years have been saying we should be seen as a technology company first, and I think we're now in that age where every business company is technology, or they are a massive part of their business is technology, so that their customers are interacting a lot more now with technology as a part of their business. If we're sort of going back and thinking about our careers, one thing that was really asked for on this episode was where I sort of ask you to go back throughout your careers and think about where were the times that I really got it right and where were the times that I really got it wrong. And so if I had to sort of throw that question on the table, does anyone have here's a moment that I can talk to?
We had a conversation with Gilbert Anoka, who was a mental coach for the All Blacks, and one of the things that he said is that there are choices and there are chances, and people sort of seem to think that you get into positions in life by chance, but actually it's the choices you make that are more important. And I think with our careers that's definitely the case. That in many points in my career I've had opportunities and I've kind of thought, well, I've never done that before, but these opportunities don't come along every day, so I'll do it. And that's probably what makes the biggest difference.
And what do you think that is? What gives you the internal monologue to say, yes, I can do that?
Optimism. Mm-hmm. So I know that I'm an optimist, and I need to be aware that sometimes I need to think about the downsides.
Yeah.
But being an optimist and thinking, well, I've never done this before, but really, how hard can it be? Is a really important thing. Going into thing with going into a new enterprise with the thought that actually you can do this is really important.
Has that ever got you into trouble?
Not that I can think of. I mean, the reality is that there are lots of people around you that can help you do things, and you don't realise how deep you are until you start reaching out for people that can give you help. I think that the thing about a leader is that you're not out there by yourself, and that I've always taken an approach that says I'm not going to pretend that I know everything, and being able to say I was wrong is a really, really strong strong message. And I can think of one point in my career where I had a choice between two roles and I took one, and it was pretty immediately obvious that it was the wrong choice. So I went back to the job recruiter and said, well, this is not working out, so if something else comes up, let me know. And ended up having an interview with the other organisation that I turned down, and they said, look, you didn't want us last time, what's changed? And I said, look, I made a decision based on the information that I had at the time. I was wrong, and I don't want to have a miserable life because I don't want to say I was wrong. and that was, for me, was a massive life lesson, is being able to say, I've made a choice and it was the wrong one, and I'm prepared to accept that it was the wrong one and move on.
Excellent. I think leadership gets us to a certain point, like learning leadership skills gets us to a certain point where you can then heavily rely on them as they grow, for the rest of your career. Obviously, there's different subject matters that we have to think about. What do you, as a leader, Jenna, how do you develop yourself as a leader?
I actually almost wonder if there's this kind of an inherent character trait within some of us that we're probably always going to end up down a leadership pathway. And I think potentially I think some of the best leaders in an organization, I should say, aren't people leaders. You see them and people are drawn to them and they trust them. And I actually think that is where you see the character trait in a person who we look to for example and, a good idea or soothing tones. Sometimes I think that is often what leadership is just someone you can trust, and it doesn't have to be a people person. And I think that's where I was up until I started shifting into, functional leadership and people leadership. And I think keeping myself in balance and check about what, I don't want to be too fluffy or too fake or, hierarchical. I think a lot of it is still about being authentic. And I think, if anything, leadership and training should be more switched into being grounded as still a worker and a practitioner and a human being about, what actually matters and stuff. Because the people around you don't necessarily need you. They're often adults. They're really capable. They're really smart. Like, they look to you for soothing tones or, fucked up, what I do, I think it's almost not necessarily training you can go off and do. I think it's just reflecting on yourself constantly and saying, actually, what they need from me in this moment is just to fix their problem potentially. But other than that, they're pretty good on their own, Like, people are smart and capable. And
at 22, I was leading 60 people. And I've never felt more imposter syndrome in my life. Most of those 60 people were 40 plus years old. How do you, as a 30-year-old now?
Oh yeah, that is my life. What you described.
Yeah. How do you go about giving yourself the confidence to keep moving forward?
Yeah, that is probably something that I've. This is probably the first time in a long time I've actually been at a table with another woman, so that's really cool. You probably feel the same way, where I'm like, that's nice. I think I keep myself in a way. I know what I want out of something, and I think that's the best advice that I was ever given to someone else, and the advice I pass on to others, which is know what you want out of that thing. And if I know that, so I'm an investigator by trade, and I kind of can stick in that lane where I'm saying, I know this space really, really well. And there's people around me who are super switched on and experts at their own spaces. And it's appreciating that. And I think that helps me because I don't have to feel imposter syndrome about not knowing something insanely complicated. And I work with PhDs all day. I don't know what they're doing. But at the same time, I try to be like, well, I actually can give a really unique context for them as well. And together we can complement each other. And I think that really helps. But there's definitely times where I'm like, what are we talking about?
Definitely in technology, I think the role of a leader is not to be the alpha geek. Because our purpose is to bring together the people that are the real experts and allow them to get on with their job. That one of the things that I learned in my first role as a manager is that the number one job of a manager is to deflect all the shit that stops people from getting their best work done. It's about giving people space so they can really grow and shine, and that's the key purpose of a leader.
Yeah, totally. Especially with technical teams, I think you find a lot of engineers, they're kind of like weedy almost. They like are super detail oriented and really, really brilliant, and they'll often be like, this thing is a huge problem, and we've known about this technical problem or this business problem for a really long time. Why does no one fix it? And I'm often like, well, is the world still spinning? Yes, it is. So is it actually a problem? And, everyone can then move on with their day and relax. The perspective that comes out of saying, well, you're not wrong, but we haven't died yet, actually, so I think we can crack on.
Well, Jenna said something there about like being in the same room as a fellow female leader in the public sector. What do you think that we can do to create better female leaders in the public sector?
Oh, I mean, diversity is such a big topic, and we've made great progress. We can have 2 female leaders
equal
in a room, right? But we're nowhere near where we need to be. And it is challenging. There's 2 sides to that conversation. One, how do we help promote women to come up, to want to get into this space? And how do we get them to jump on these opportunities? How do they then lead their way through and navigating the challenges? The system is designed. The system is the problem. It's designed by men for men, right? Who takes the primary care of looking after the family? Primarily women. So who takes time off having kids? And by the time you come back to the workforce, you're 5 years behind your partner in your career. So looking at all the constraints that exist in the system, how it's designed, how do we help women get through those? And then when they do, and often they don't, and when they do, what do? We have the decision-making at the table is not diverse enough. So people making decisions will always say, well, I picked the right person for the job. You did, based on you. So if we don't have diverse decision-making at the table, you're not going to have diversity come up. And it's challenging as it is for diversity to come up. So it's that 2-sided sort of coin that needs to be balanced. But challenging the system itself would probably be the most sledgehammer
Agreed.
to the problem.
What do you, Stuart, how do you go about, we talked about this before, right? So there's how do we bring people up? But then when you get here, how do you keep yourself engaged? How do you keep yourself learning? And so what do you do to seek out knowledge to be able to continue to grow in your role?
I might just respond to the diversity point first, and conscious I'm the grey-haired white male. Looking at John as well. I think there's a couple of dimensions there. We talked about gender. There's an ethnicity composition. This is an issue for the wider tech workforce. But in terms of public sector, I'm encouraged over the last few years about some of the initiatives the public sector has underway there. It's not uniquely in the tech part of the organisation, with a drive to get the composition of the public sector to largely reflect the composition of the general population. We've still got a long way to go. I think the opportunity to do more in that space, I mean, there's some fantastic programs in public sector like GovTech where we take graduates in and rotate them around agencies, and it's fantastic to see the wonderful diversity of talent we have coming in. But we've got a long way to go, totally agree. On the leadership, for me, that's been a bit of a lifelong learning journey. I don't think you ever arrive at a destination of being a leader. It continues to evolve and change, and for me, that's been the really rewarding part of leadership. I really enjoy working with people, but actually the opportunity to continue to challenge yourself and learn and develop has been a really fascinating part for me.
Yeah. And where do you see yourself next? Do you see yourself going to the business? Do you want to stay in technology?
My whole career has been in and around technology. I've done a few tangential things, a bit like John. Some of those are great, some not so great. But I guess for me, technology, data and information probably are the two key anchor points. I really enjoyed sectors I've worked in where there's a much clearer sense of purpose. So for me, the drive around what we do in education and other parts of human services of government, and whatever role that might take, I'm not specifically looking to stay in a tech swim lane in that regard. But tech is in all roles these days.
As a leader in a changing public sector now with everything that's happening, do you think technology is going to help us in terms of, like, there's some pressure on at the moment in the public sector to reduce costs, to reduce headcount? Is this where technology can be a helper?
I think it can. I mean, every agency will be in a very different starting position there. But as a very, very general statement, where we are looking for efficiencies in public sector around things like, I don't know, workflow type processes would be one example. I think there are opportunities for tech to make a difference there. We talked a little bit about LLMs. Fantastic to hear what you're doing at Callaghan's. I'm not sure the broader public sector is ready for mainstream adoption there yet, but that will come. Described us as thinking about us being a tech company. I think for public sector, that's actually a bit more skewed towards data and information first, and then how to use tech to use that to good effect.
If I don't ask this question, angry vendors are going to mob me, and I'll stop giving them your phone number. I'll start giving them your phone numbers because
I'll block you.
Respect, nice try.
I wouldn't blame you. So the one thing vendors want to know is, like, how do I build a relationship with senior leaders in the public sector? Like, what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, what's the best way to do it? And so let's say if I start with you.
So it depends if we're talking about existing vendors or people wanting to come and start engaging and start that relationship. I've come from private sector. I've been a vendor many years in life, so I kind of understand the two sides of the coin. And now that I'm in public service, I understand a lot more around the gap that has to be there sometimes. Good vendor is your partner in crime. What are we going to do about this? What can you do for me here? This is where we're at. This is the challenge that we're having. Like, not once have I delivered something that just went exactly how I thought it was gonna go. Challenges come your way, and how you navigate them. Your partners and vendors play a big role in that. So having somebody who's there with you on that journey makes all the difference, and that's fantastic. So how do you choose a good vendor? How do you build those relationship plays a really big part. Often in a vendor-client relationship, the contract is the thing that defines how you're going to operate. You will deliver this, and I'm going to pay this much money, and I'm going to have this on this day. And if not, then something bad happens, type of thing. So engaging on the outcomes, on working through challenges and solutions. It's a little bit harder to, I suppose, engage in a cold calling from vendors. Hey, tell me what you're doing in your agency. Great.
How do you,
like, no.
Jenna, on that point, right? So a lot of vendors will say, if I don't know anything about it before RFP, there's no point tendering for it, right? 100%. So how do you get to know these vendors, and how do you give them this information that they need to be able to make it worthwhile for them to tender?
Well, I almost don't agree with the view that if they haven't chatted to us first, they shouldn't apply, because I've seen over time that ANZ procurement rules say that you have to give everyone a fair shot, and I've seen potentially underdogs or unknowns come through because that's the right one to do. So potentially almost wouldn't agree with that. But what I would say is some of the best vendors are the ones that pay attention, right? And I think that there's this antiquated kind of view that public sector is a little bit sleepy, or they don't have to put as much effort into things from a vendor or commercial perspective. And my experience in the public sector is that public servants are super switched on. They're very educated. They're very driven, and we'll kind of sniff that out and pick it up, right? So I think if and when vendors want to really build partnerships and relationships with things, it can be done in a really authentic way, not really a salesy way, in a way that shows that they've paid attention to what your agency does or wants to do or has done, and that goes a long way. You know, I've seen RFPs where, you know, they haven't mentioned NZGov once, even though our whole thing is NZGov. So instantly I'm going, well, you can't read. So, you know. So yeah, I think they should just kind of be a bit more authentic and build partnerships in a way that is pretty easy.
Stuart, if I was to throw the question over to you,
Yep.
what, so vendors are probably texting me right now saying, hey, how should I approach him, or what should I do to get into education? What advice would you give them?
I think if you talk about education specifically, it's a very wide set of organisations, thousands of educational institutions, 10 or so government agencies. And I look at the opportunities in education as immense, particularly for software vendors. Education uses a vast amount of software technology all day, every day. We work quite a lot with industry bodies. EdTech NZ would be an example of that, where we try and look at the pan-industry considerations there and work with them around things like standards and those types of initiatives. In terms of individual vendors, I think there's government procurement gets quite a bad rap, probably rightly so in some cases, to be fair. I think agencies need to be careful around how they describe requirements, that they're not too prescriptive, that they narrow the range of possibilities. It's a complicated landscape. We have functional leaders like GCDO who set some of those things for us centrally, and we consume from sometimes panels or single suppliers in some cases, and you've got to kind of integrate that and make it all work. I think the opportunity I would encourage vendors to look at, though, is where we have early stages of procurement to really get involved heavily there before an actual tender or RFP is out in the market. You know, my procurement colleagues call this competitive dialogue or something these days. But it's genuinely an opportunity to shape what the RFP or requirements will be. So, you know, I guess in the bad old days, if you think about it that way, it was, you didn't ever put a non-compliant response in because it would go straight in the bin. I think the opportunity for innovation has to be in those early stages where you're influencing through RFIs or dialogue, so that agencies are aware of what is possible and what's out there.
You talked about like departments coming together. Then that's something that I'm really keen to dig into a bit more detail. And if I throw this over to you, Milica, so with your new role, what's like? I'm surprised every time I sit down with 4 leaders in the public sector that usually half the time they don't know each other. And I'm also surprised that when we talk about something, they'll leave the table and say, we should follow up on this. This has been really good. I'm very biased, come from the startup industry where you don't have any money, and so you have to steal ideas and get around together, right? And so, so I'm very conscious of that. But how can we, in the public sector, get our ideas across, like support the whole of government versus our just independent agency?
Yeah, fantastic question. I'll mention Bill Moses again. How many times can we mention his name in this interview? But you know, he's come up with this concept of kotahitanga, and you would have heard it. I'm sure if you would have everyone's heard it, right? And it's a concept where we break down the digital barriers between agencies, and the world of public service exists, and we tap into all the wisdom and all the experience and all the lessons learned, all the people knowledge, I suppose, of what's been done and what's yet to be done. If we did break down the barriers between the agencies, what will we do with that? We run a number of workshops with public service across different kind of groups of people with different perspectives, you know, new professionals, CIOs, heads of HR, and you know, we sort of uncovered some really, really strong themes. It's fantastic, but some really strong themes have come out of that, where people genuinely want to tap into the wider public service wisdom, if I call it that. If I'm about to start a project that's based on this and this, let's say I'm implementing a project in technology A, and out of 5 agencies have done it, 2 have done it really badly, but 3 have done it really great. If I was to have a coffee and I go, oh, I know about this and I can soak in some wisdom from there, then I'm starting from a success point straight away, right? I have already succeeded so much and I'm starting from a good point. If we can find people who has done something like this, being able to look up people, it was one of the key things. The funniest story is the new professionals were like, these are young people coming through, born in the world of internet and smartphones, right? Like, these guys are going to have some groundbreaking ideas. We were so looking forward to that. The funny thing is, what they really wanted was an ability to see people's availability in the calendars across agencies.
Just an outlook for everyone.
We can't schedule a meeting. And it's like really dawned on me just how much people who, like I say, were born in the era of the internet and smartphones, they struggle just to get through the admin of getting people together around the room because you don't know when people are available. This is the barriers.
Hire a recruiter. They're really good at getting people around the table. They'll do whatever they can.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's interesting, and I wanted to expand on that, John. So if you have if we're at a restaurant and you can order from the set menu here that's helping government get together, but then you're like, all right, I'm RBNZ, so I'm going to go a la carte here. Like, we're a little bit different. We need to do something here. Is that something that's going to help you by having group buying, but also the ability to think a little bit differently at times when you need to?
I think it does. Definitely the CIO forum has been really good in terms of having almost a phone list that you can call on if you've got questions. It's something that as a Reserve Bank, as a central bank, we do with other banks around the world. So there's the Bank of International Settlement, which is a bit of a clearinghouse. There's EMEAP, which is a grouping of East Asia and Pacific central banks that we do a lot of sharing with as well. So that gives us a lot of, peer networks that we can see what's happening around the rest of the world. Across government, we've got all of the specifications and guidelines. Some of the things that are really important to us, like PSR and NZISM and those sorts of things, are really important frameworks. And we
break those frameworks down.
So PSR is the protective security requirements, and that covers physical personnel security. And then NZISM is the New Zealand Information Security Manual, which is all of the cyber security rules. And those are really important guidelines to us because maintaining security for our environments, whether they be physical environments or our people or our technology, is absolutely important.
Jenna's going,
yes,
that's right.
Good answer.
Anything to add there?
No, I think you're spot on. And especially for public agencies, we care a lot about the material. It's no longer just like what you produce and work on each day, like documents or files or things. It is like, do you know something, and therefore you are the person we want to make sure understands their obligations as a Crown entity, So it's, people, and physically, are you in a position in your building that, keeps you and the staff safe, right? It's actually quite complex, and it should be an enabler, right? Where you're going, I can still go to work every single day, but I'm safe and secure, and I have the kind of security mindset, because if it goes south, catastrophic business impact, and that's what you start to care about. So completely agree.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the threats that we're really starting to face into is both supply chain risk and insider threat. Because third-party risk, especially so moving into cloud computing and outsourcing, potentially it opens you up to risks that maybe you haven't thought about in the past, and it's really hard. It's really, really hard to say to a vendor, how do you provide the services, when often they're like, well, actually, I've got someone that provides the services to me, and they've got someone that provides the services to them. And understanding that risk is something that we're really facing into now, and it's a hard problem.
I hope you guys are doing tabletops internally in your own organization to test your incident response prepreparedness.
What's a tabletop?
What's
and that's
Come
something,
over. See you Thursday.
and that's something that we've been doing. We've been running crisis simulations.
Good.
We've run 4 in the last year, and they've started inside digital solutions and security, and are now expanding out across the rest
Into
of the
like
bank.
your comms teams and your
Into our payments environment.
Right.
We're also starting cross-agency crisis simulations as well. So,
good.
and those are important not just because of the it checks that your controls work, but also that it builds a muscle memory. And the first time that you have to use a crisis plan, you don't want it to be the time that you really that it's real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. Like what actually we're like lacking a lot of generally, not just in cyber or digital, is muscle memory, because you need an instant response where things go wrong. You have this crisis, and your comms team are there, and your legal team's there, and your board's there, and everyone's there, right? But after that, you start getting into the regulatory phase, which is your ombudsman and your commissioners and your ministers, and then you potentially police, like depending on the severity of it. That's where it starts to get. It's very long and very punchy.
Speaking of ministers, I was having a glass of wine with the minister, I won't say who, recently, who I know personally, and this person, I'm really careful about my words here. This person said that they would like to see technology be on the front page of the newspaper for positive reasons. And we all in the public sector seem to worry about the front page news because that's, for us, it's a negative connotation. And so if I was to flip that and where everyone always asks, what are you worried about? What keeps you up at night? What's on the front page of the news? What's the thing that you would be most proud of if I go around the table to see at your department or in public sector on the front page of the newspaper?
That we made a difference. That we made a positive difference, and I think that if I look at the difference between my life in corporate land and my life in the public sector, really the one of the big differences for me is getting up in the morning knowing that the job that you're doing is making a difference to all of New Zealand is really important.
How are you doing that?
So we've got a really important role in terms of economic well-being and prosperity for all New Zealanders, and so everything that we can do that supports that through our mandates is going to be really important. We're an organisation of essentially an organisation of knowledge workers. We do make a profit, but it's not our primary motive. We do manufacture banknotes, but we don't really manufacture widgets or anything. So basically, we're an organisation of 500 to 600 knowledge workers, and anything that I can do that helps my colleagues be more effective, more productive, is going to have a really big impact for all of the economy. And that's a really good thing to know, in my heart, that it's not just, can I make another $1 billion this year, please?
Yeah. What about you, Milica? What would you like to see on the front page of the news in this new opportunity you're going into?
Nothing in the news, thank you, because news doesn't really share great stories.
News can be good.
No,
news can be good.
no,
You've just got to twist it and
I
say,
know.
you got to get the
people
journalists on side from day one is what you do. Take them on the life cycle of your role.
I mean, people don't often come and thank you for the technology working, for years. They come and tell you when it's not working for the 1 minute. It doesn't quite work like that. The things that I love to see is 2 parts, right? One is the agency, the people in the agency, like you say, enabled to do their jobs well. That is where the magic is. And if we get a technology humming, and nothing really happens without technology, if we get that humming, they can do the jobs well. We streamline processes, we put automation in place, we create the spaces for them. Another passion that's there is enabling, from a public service commission perspective, we collaborate and engage with agencies on the daily. That's part of the job, and that being able to enable that is not difficult technically, but it has a number of areas to it. So being able to spin something up and enable collaboration and work to happen across agencies is something that really that's really awesome.
That's something for me, I'm an optimist, right? So I'm always looking for how can we influence and how can we do things to make a difference. And so that sort of leads me on to my sort of final question that I'm really keen for everyone to answer, that I'll get around, is that I'm an old grey-haired recruiter who's seen so many different cycles of recruitment. Public sector, I've seen it all. I've seen new governments come in, I've seen the change, I've seen this, I've seen the corporate sector, I've seen every startup. Every time I meet a founder that's telling me that they're the latest and greatest, I'm like, great. I just want to see passion, and I want to see optimism, and I want to see change, right? And so On the point of optimism, Stuart, if like some people are thinking that they haven't been through a change of government before in the past and they're like, oh, it's a nervous time to get into the public sector, what would you say to someone that's contemplating going into the public sector and technology right now?
I'll absolutely go for it. We have political change every 3 years. We have economic cycles that will affect the capacity of the public sector and the tech workforce for sure. But public sector performs a set of essential services in Aotearoa. We also are a universal service provider in most of what we do. That's increasingly tech-enabled. I think the medium to long-term opportunities are growth in tech and digital, in data and AI. That will be the new frontier for us. So, it's a wonderfully rewarding sector to work in, and we've touched on many of these things throughout the conversation today. But to me, having worked both in public and private sectors over the course of my career, one of the things that's really rewarding, and you touched on it before, is the opportunity to learn off others. It's a very collegial environment.
Yep.
I can call up one of 100 people around public sector and ask them for help with something, to share experiences. From a career perspective, I mean, we talked about leadership early. Leadership takes many, many different forms, and one of the wonderful opportunities in public sector is to work across different agencies. So you're employed by one in a substantive job, but I look at every opportunity for our own staff to go and work in other agencies, to go and work in projects. It's a massive variety. I can sit here honestly saying in the time I've spent in public sector, I've never been bored for a single day. There are new challenges every day. It's hugely complex. A lot of requirements, some of which John touched on a bit earlier on, but everything in an environment like public sector, something goes bump in the night every night. You're always responding to something. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. Go for it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Just to add on to that, coming from private into public and learning about the census that we do, and it's amazing to see the stats around why people are in public service, and the number one reason is because they really want to make a difference. And the difference that you're making is to your family, to the people around you, to the communities around you, being able to sort of make a difference that lifts the floor for everyone around you is a great feeling, right? So public service never will deviate from that. That's its job. That's what it does. So public service in itself, no matter what colour the government is on and what challenges are happening. Like if it's not this, it'll be something else. There is always something that's happening. It's absolutely almost irrelevant what the challenges are. Yes, there's changes, sure, but in every changes there's opportunities. There's opportunities to reshape things, to double down on the value that needs to be delivered, and to think differently about how we go about things. And that's, I don't know, I find that exciting. I wouldn't be sitting there going, oh, I don't know, public service seems a bit these days. It's tough, and it's awesome because we get an opportunity to reshape things. Like, we have to think hard.
How do you balance John, and let's say, how do you balance I'm in the public service industry, I need to be accountable for taxpayers and all these things from your job itself as a technologist that's like, oh, I'd really want to implement this if I could?
So I think that often there's a feeling that the public sector isn't as good at change or isn't as good at projects as the private sector. And my experience has been that private sector failure is just as common, as just not as visible. And I think that whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, you're having to make the most of the money and the resources that are available to you. I guess the value that you get out of that is more visible from a public sector perspective if you spend a ton of money and it doesn't deliver the outcomes that you're hoping it to. But I think that there's also often we talk about risk of doing something, but I think there's actually a larger risk of not doing something. The risk of stasis is much greater because the world isn't slowing down. And for many of our organisations, especially Te Pūtua Mātua, the financial sector is changing faster and faster, and for us to be relevant, we have to change faster with it as well. And so I think that's part of the thing that's really exciting, is we're at an inflection point where it's becoming clear to the entire bank that we need to be more adaptive, we need to be faster to change, and that technology is going to play a large part of that. and that if we do sit still, things are going to run away from us.
Excellent. Jenna, I'm going to ask you a question, which is to ask a question of the next guests that come on. What question would you want to see from 4 people in the sort of public sector, be it CE, CT, Chief Digital? Without knowing who they are, what would you want to know?
Oh, God. I'd probably do a spin on one of the questions you asked before, is how are they planning or currently undertaking work to bring in emergent technologies in a positive way into their organizations? Yeah. Because I agree, I think we need to see more positive stories, and actually the proof's in the pudding, right? Where we see leaders and agencies bringing in emergent technologies safely into the organizations to deliver that public good to New Zealanders. And for me, that's maybe things like AI, or it's like carbon initiatives, or it's Web3 blockchain communities, shared buildings and structures, network tenants. Like, I would want to see how are they, if at all, bringing in the cool new tech internally,
Yeah. What do you think the answer will be?
Depends who it is. Depends who it is. Some will say yes, depending who they are. There's definitely cases where agencies right now are being quite forward-leaning, because I think they, same as you guys as Reserve Bank, they know and believe that you'll get left behind. And something that we cannot accept is not delivering that public good to New Zealanders. That's the consequence, that's the impact. And that to me is unacceptable, right? You have to do it. And I think that's kind of the belief is, if you don't do it, the impact is felt in the public. You don't deliver roads and services and support, things like that. Some of them are a little bit old school though still, I think. But I think that comes from places that are really hierarchical. So if places have heaps and heaps of structures, like I've seen examples where people hit a threshold where they're going, let's care about this, and someone just decides they don't, and then it kind of dies. But I think that's changing. A lot of public service agencies now are becoming actually quite flat and reducing the hierarchy barriers, and I think that's a good thing.
I agree. So last question I'm going to throw over to you, Stuart. What do you see as the future looking like forward? What are the big things over the next 2 to 5 years that you see in the public sector?
I think there's a couple of broad trends there. Yeah, we've touched on generative AI. I think that's an inevitable trend that will hit all industries, and public sector will.
I think AI is already here.
It's been here for a number of years.
All the time. Yeah.
But yeah, I think working how public sector can take advantage of that capability, but do it in a way that mitigates some of the risks that we've touched on will definitely be something to consider. Just trying to think about what other broad trends we might see over the next 5 years.
One of the things across the public sector is that lots of agencies are collecting information, collecting data. It's really difficult for us to come up with a model that allows us to share or use that data across government. And there's good reasons for that. But it does create inefficiencies in terms of data sets and the currency of the information that we're dealing with. And very much we're shifting from, if you looked at our strategies 5 years ago, we would have said we're data-driven, or we want to be data-driven. We're now getting to a point where we say we want to be insight-driven, and insight-driven brings a lot more context-specific information, and we can't do that without the right information. And I know as a citizen, the thing that's most frustrating is being asked for the same information multiple times by different agencies as part of the same process.
Yeah.
I think the other broad trend we might see there is, as we've seen in many other sectors, a big shift in the channel model and channel mix. Government has been, or public sector has been doing digital channels now since the early days of e-government, so it's 25 odd years, but still maintains a big branch office network, still maintains large call centre environments. It's interesting looking at what other jurisdictions around the world have been doing in that space. I think the challenge for public sector, particularly unlike some private sector businesses where you can choose to service a part of the market that's profitable or attractive, in public sector we are a universal provider. So as we go increasingly into the digital channel, thinking about how we can still service the entire population for whatever service the agency provides is going to be the really big challenge for us. And that's described in various ways around digital inclusion and digital equity. But there's a long tail to that. Even if you supplied all the technology, there's still a gap and a motivation for people that, for whatever reason, don't want to use a digital channel. So, for how long do we maintain analog or non-digital capability as a core capability in every agency? Do you look at other models that aggregate that up or shift it to another provider?
And that is a challenge always from an efficiency perspective as well, because it seems that for every new technology, it's basically a new way of doing the thing that we used to have done previously. And really that question of do you run 6 of those channels at the same time, and does that come with a greater cost? And what does that mean for the other services that you provide? But we to your point, we need to be inclusive. We need to be universal, and that means that especially when we're talking about digital services, there is a digital divide that we need to be crossing, and that's I think one of the key functions of government is making sure that everybody is able to participate.
And there are a lot of things government does that are delivered as services in person, health, police, those types of things. There's also a whole chunk which is about the flow of information between government and citizens and government and businesses, and I think that's where you'll see significant disruption, different models emerge. A real risk, I suspect, we will need to think through is to what extent are we the direct provider of that versus third parties coming along and intermediating that relationship, and there are pros and cons of that model. You're seeing that emerge already in the consumer tech ecosystems. I can ask my home speaker or my phone. It will go away and interact with an agency website and deliver that as a spoken answer in whatever language you like. That's a fantastic capability, but what is the trust relationship in those things? So there's some really interesting, complex challenges to work through.
Indeed. Well, I think whatever we know that the law is that technology is going to keep changing and changing, but I think the appetite now in the public sector is probably more than it's ever been in terms of like implementing some of these technologies and bring them in. I think you've spoken it well before, Jenna. So thank you so much for everyone for coming on. I really appreciate you sharing space and giving up some time to share this information with everyone. Thank you again, and I hope you have a really fantastic day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you to those 4 amazing leaders for sharing space and for giving up their time to sit around and provide a product for you to actually consume. But thank you more importantly to you who have spent this hour or whatever it's been watching or listening to this podcast and giving up your time. I hope you learned something. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that you've enjoyed it so much that if you're watching it on YouTube right now, you'll subscribe, or if you're watching it on Spotify, you'll follow straight away onto the platform. It's something that we're trying to create to give you opportunities for you to learn or for you to see what happens around these exec tables or around these SLT meetings. And so thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everyone that's come on. I love doing these podcasts, and I can't wait to see you again on the next one.